right, I think everyone is here, so welcome. All right, well, thank you everyone for being here today and welcome to this year's celebration of German Diversity Day. This is thanks to ESMT's Inclusive Leadership Roundtable in partnership with our Women in Leadership Club. Last year, ESMT signed a diversity charter to publicly commit to creating a diverse and inclusive environment for us to all work and learn in. And this panel is our way of celebrating that commitment. So thank you again, and I'll hand it over to Catalina to kick us off.
Thank you very much, Samantha. Hello, everybody. I'm Catalina Stefanescu-Kunze. I'm Professor of Management Science here at ESMT Berlin and the Deutsche Post DHL Chair at the school as well. I am very much looking forward to our discussion today on how leaders can promote and ensure diversity and inclusion in their workplaces. Now, we're fortunate to have three panelists joining us today, so let me try to introduce them. We have Sarah Cordivano, who's the Global Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Springer Nature. We have Catherine Bishop, Chief Relationship Officer at Factory Berlin. And we have Stuart Cameron, CEO and founder of the Ulala Group, and also the co-founder of the Panda Women Network. Welcome, everybody. Looking very much forward to this discussion. And let me start by kicking out a personal question to all of you. Tell us what made you engage and being passionate with the topic of diversity and inclusion. Stories and anecdotes are most welcome. Catherine, would you like to start?
Sure. One of those awkward moments, like who's first, who's on second. Yeah, I'd love to start. I mean, for me personally, it's just the right thing to do because it's everyone's issue. It's not a female issue or a homosexual issue. It's everyone is impacted by it. And I think that we all want to live in a society that is dreamt, conceived, designed by different perspectives and expertise. So being part of that and endorsing it and finding others that will help build a future is super important. I mean, the society we live in right now and the political systems and economic constructs and even the technology or academic institutions that we move in were by and large conceived mostly by this very distinct group of mostly men. And for a large part a long time ago, and they're not a true reflection of our society today. So I think that goes without saying that we all need to look at it, analyze the situation, and build something that's maybe more future-proof. I didn't feel like it was a pressing issue necessarily when I grew up in Canada. And then when I moved to Europe, I felt like, well, there's something that really still needs to be done here, and I need to actively get involved. And one of that was really highlighted. I was at an event actually around the corner from ESMT a few months ago. And it was an event about innovation, about startups, technology, a 3-hour panel discussions. And there were 19 panelists and there wasn't a single woman, on any of the discussions. I mean, it was a manel in the perfect sense of the word. And I was really offended by it because I don't find there's an excuse to not find thought leaders that, don't apply to that specific construct. So I, thought it's time to pull up my sleeves and be much more actively involved and throw my name into the ring every time and force myself and hopefully those around me out of our comfort zones so that we could represent.
That's right. Stuart?
Yeah. Thank you, Katrin. Great story. Oh, by the way, I don't mind if I can see the other people. That gives me a little bit of feedback when I'm done or I'm talking too much. So you can turn up your camera. For me, it was a little bit different. I started with diversity because I was very egoistic, because I wanted to find a working place where I can be myself. And because when I was very young and joined the working world, I found out, oh, this place is not that nice to different people. Yeah, if you fit to the majority, it's fine. But when you're a little bit different, in my case, being gay, I could see this could be a problem at the work. So I was not myself, and I always thought it would be so great to work in a place where I can be myself, and I don't have to care about if I'm gay or straight, whatever the company stands behind me. And that was not the case, at least long time ago. So I'm a little bit older, I'm 40 years now, and that's happened over 20 years ago. And yeah, I had during the time, I had some ideas to do more and more events. I wanted to change the world a little bit. And when I was starting in a small company and organizing a career event for mid-sized companies, I saw, oh, wouldn't it be great to have like a career fair, which is like on the one side, you have this LGBT friendly companies. On the other side are people like me, LGBT people who are really looking forward to finally meet some companies who are appreciating us. And so that was the start. And 11 years ago, I started the first Sticks and Stones career fair, which is now the largest LGBT career fair here in Europe, with over 100 proud companies, over 3,000 people joining us there. And more. This will take longer when I talk about all the project. But I really did it at the beginning for myself to find an open company, and now I'm doing it for others with my team. And it's a really nice journey, and I can say diversity, it's a lot of pain, but by the end, it's so much worth it, and it's so much more fun.
That's right. Thank you, Stuart. Great input. Sarah, what about you?
Hi. So first, I hope you can hear me okay. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Great. We had some connection problems before, so I'm really happy that that we can all hear each other. So yeah, I'm from the US, and I originally studied geography and urban studies at university, and that's kind of where I got involved in looking into how complex access to healthcare, access to healthy food, and the kind of environmental justice element that plays a part into that that whole equation. So I, through that experience, through studying about this, I was really interested in, what can I do to be a part of creating a little bit more equity in the world. And when I first graduated from university, I worked in geospatial mapping, and it wasn't really as much involvement in this community as I wanted. So I did more work around building community spaces within this field. And eventually I moved to Berlin a few years later, and I just, I decided I wanted to continue doing this work. And so at the time I got involved with the company I was working at. I got involved with their employee resource groups, and I started to get involved with kind of what diversity and inclusion means on the corporate level. So what can corporations do to make the working environment more diverse, but also more inclusive and equitable? And that was a really great, really great experience. I really enjoyed, getting involved in the corporate side of things, and kind of through that, I slowly got more experience and more understanding of what it means to be a D&I advocate in Germany and in a corporate space. So yeah, I kind of just grew in that role. And I recently joined Springer Nature as a maternity cover, actually, for Jessica Gadamu, who's on parental leave right now. And I'm in the role of Global Director of D&I. So now I'm kind of continuing that work at the corporate level, but for a more global company. So it's been a good journey, and I really appreciate all the opportunities I've had to connect with smart people like Stuart and others. So yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation today.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Now, just a quick logistical note for our attendees. After the panel discussion, we shall have a dedicated Q&A session, but you're also most welcome to also ask questions during the discussion itself. Please, to this end, use the Q&A tool at the bottom of the Zoom webinar window. Please do not put your questions in the chat. We will monitor the Q&A tool, and we will pick up on the questions as we go along. Yeah? Thank you very much. So moving on to our topics. Now, it seems obvious that diversity and inclusion is not just the right thing to do, but it actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, the world is diverse, and naturally our workplaces should reflect that. However, it is also a fact that there's still those who argue that the concept may be slightly overrated, or maybe it's everything okay with that, but it just doesn't apply to their industry, or it just doesn't apply to their company. So Sarah, maybe you can pick up on this one, but in your own experience and in your own observations, what are some general obstacles to achieving true diversity and inclusion in the workplace rather than just pro forma measures?
Yeah, so I actually think there's a lot of obstacles here. I think it's actually quite difficult to have a truly authentic and appropriate approach to D&I for an organization. I think one of the main obstacles is oftentimes corporations really focus on the business impact of D&I. What's the, how much money will it save? How many more customers can we access through D&I initiatives? And I think, there is some merit to the argument that D&I has a strong business impact, but if that's the only reason you're doing it, then, when something like coronavirus comes, it's always the first thing that gets ticked off the agenda, because all of a sudden you have other financial concerns and this is the least pressing. So I think for an organization to really truly embrace D&I, they have to think about the value of D&I, not just for the business impact, but for the social justice reasons, for the moral purpose behind it, and because it's the right thing to do. And then another obstacle would be, when an organization creates an approach around D&I, but it's either too top-down or too grassroots. I think there's a sweet spot where it's a mix of kind of a corporate strategy, but also with involvement from the employees. If it's only led by the leaders, I think the employees throughout the company won't feel like that approach really represents them. And if it's only driven by the employees, then there's no buy-in from the leaders. So it kind of has to be this mix between both groups. And lastly, I would say another big challenge or obstacle is, an organization that sees diversity just as a gender topic, and they really they focus on that. They only use a measure of gender to track their success, and they don't really think about other dimensions of diversity, such as race and ethnicity, such as LGBT, many other types of diversity, age, parental status, and then they don't think about inclusion. And I think inclusion is actually much more, I won't say more important, but it's equally as important. And if you don't have a working environment where employees feel like it's inclusive, then any employee that you hire is not going to feel like it's a working environment for them, so they'll leave.
Right, so
yeah.
Different dimensions to diversity and inclusion, obviously, not just the gender one, and very important to keep all of them in mind. Now, I want to pick up on your earlier thought on how this should be neither too much of a bottom-up nor a top-down approach. Now, it does have a lot to do with the culture of a company, and clearly the culture most of the times comes from the top. And so how do we engage leaders? How do we motivate them to become genuine role models in that respect?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the one thing about leaders are they're role models whether they want to be or not, whether they're good role models or not. They're just naturally, when you're leaders within a company, everyone looks up to you. So I think it's really important to support these leaders to be role models on D&I, because they set the tone for the rest of the organization. So the first thing I would say is you have to meet people where they are. So, sometimes for some leaders, you have to start with the basics and kind of explain, basics like what is intersectionality, what does diversity mean beyond gender. I think you can't just assume that they already have that core knowledge. And then another thing is you have to find what's compelling to them. You have to find what will really make the topic relevant and impactful for them. And, this also might be finding the right coach or finding the right role model for them. Because, you know, if I deliver a message and someone else delivers a message, you know, it really could be, you know, depending on who delivers the message, it can be accepted completely differently. So, you know, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to use the role models you have in your organization as amplifiers, and kind of to tell an authentic story to get other leaders on board. And once you find those champions, once you find those people in your organization that can really speak confidently and fluently on the topic of D&I, I think it's better to kind of invest in them as role models than kind of spend a lot of time and effort to convince someone who doesn't want to be convinced. So giving them tools such as, you know, tips on inclusive language, books or podcasts to listen to, you know, giving them an opportunity to ask questions in a safe space, or some coaching. I think all of those could help bring a leader who's interested in the topic from the position of, you know, someone who's interested but not yet a role model to someone who's a really strong and compelling role model on D&I.
Yeah. Stuart?
Yes, I really would like to add something to that because, again, we're doing this diversity in general also since 11 years, and we see like things which are like really helping, that a company is changing. And there's, of course, there are people when they are pro-diversity and not just believing in the equality, but also see the business side. This is perfect. And actually all leaders should know it and understand it. But we see there's a big problem that a lot of people, especially in senior positions, are not really willing to do that, because if they really want diversity, that also means very often that you lose power. And this is a lot of people who are leaders, they don't want to lose their power. So when it comes to, let's bring some more women to top position, there will be always like some argue, she is not that good, and there would be better men than you for that. Like I hear so many excuses for that. So like, I think the one thing is really like, yeah, it's good to, if you have already this open company and they know it and it's come from the top, because you need it from the top, that they're really behind this topic, this is great. But if you're not in this company, I really hope that also politics will help us. So I'm a big pro now for like quotas. I hated quotas. I thought it's stupid, and only the best people should come to the top. But we can see right now on the top positions, they're not always like the best people. So please make it more equal with quotas. And I think it's also important that like with other shareholders to really like push companies to really do something here, because this is good for business. So I think it's very important to have those both things. Like it's good for equality, but it's also for good for business. So if you don't invest in diversity, you're not a good leader and you should get fired. Very easy. And so this is our approach, and we're also trying to work more with companies together who are like really understand it, that it's really worth it and it's good and it's much more fun to work with them. And we're also saying to all, and like to job candidates when they're looking for jobs, we always asking them, hey, if you want to do something here, like always look out what are you doing for diversity in general. Because only if a company really invests in that and they have an open culture, it's good for everybody. And not just like for the people, like for the LGBT, for women. It's, by the way, also great for white, cis, straight men. And if it's an open culture, everybody wants to work in this environment. So, by the way, that's also the reason why at our Sticks and Stones career fair, there are always straight people coming too. Not because they're like queer interested, they're just like, okay, if a company is investing in LGBT, there must be more open, which is true. So I think we have to, both things, and help the people who really want to do the change and who understand that's a benefit, but also push the other people out who really don't get it and who don't want to share the power.
Now, prompted by your comments, there were actually some questions in the chat. Do you think that diversity and inclusion measures that are forced upon leaders will have actually a negative effect, or might they have a negative effect? Would it not be wise to have hiring processes that consider the candidate's awareness of diversity and inclusion? So in other words, to start at the entry point rather than trying to change people's minds later.
Of course, that's really great, and there are a lot of initiatives to do it. To let everybody tries to be like as how you said it, to don't have any biases, etc. And there's like unconscious bias trainings for a lot of people, and it's really, really good to understand that everybody of us, everybody here who listen to that has tons of biases. I think it's 140 biases everybody has. The problem is, even if you get rid of the pictures on the CV and the name and the date, when the birth date, etc., there will be a time you will meet this person in real life, and suddenly there will be all this biases coming back. And right now there is no proof of anything right now that it's really 100% fair to get a job. And there's still so many, there's luck included, and there's just, you know, the people of it. Every fourth job or every third job you get through connections. Still, it's not just a process. It's like, who do you know? And then you have a bigger benefit to get it. Or the other problems is, if you're a woman, you have less chance to get in a high position. Same with LGBT or people with not common names. So it's very, very difficult, and I really would like to see more change in the top department, and the company is really doing something there, and to showcase diversity. Because when you look into a company, they're saying they're doing diversity, but on the top level, you only have like, I don't know, 20 white guys in the same suit. I'm sorry, this is not diversity. Yeah, that's what I have to say about this.
I think we've all seen that. Now, there is, of course, when establishing this culture, there's a very fine line to thread between educating people, employees, leaders, and setting up policy. So in a way, imposing. And it is a fact that when changes and policies are being introduced without true, genuine engagement, then they can create a negative effect, because people's natural reaction is to resist change. We all know that. So, Catherine, if I may pick up on this, how can we as individuals educate employees in diversity and inclusion mindset without making them feel that this is an imposition from the top down?
I think Sarah eloquently made some comments to that before already. One key component is certainly communication. I mean, you need to allow room for discussion, also skepticism, but I think the important thing is need to be able to counter that caution with data. And we've heard it previously. There's a plethora of studies out there that demonstrate that there's huge business advantages to having diverse teams, whether it's on the innovation side of things, financial returns, but just that it's incredibly important for company culture, for motivation, and also for retention. So in general, I think that to be able to communicate that non-homogeneous teams are just smarter in general, because they boost the full-on intellectual potential of a company, is key. But how do you do that? Like, do you do it from the top down, or do you bring everyone along for the ride? And I personally think, and that's what we preach here at Factory Berlin, is that you have to have an environment of engagement. So you need to bring people in, and it's just like when you create your values for your organization, those shouldn't be the values that are dictated by one person, and they shouldn't be top down or just a CEO making a blanket statement, but you have different stakeholders from different tables that come around and that need to be involved, because at the end of the day, that cultural shift and mindset shift is when you improve the systems, and the systems and processes have to be developed and improved together in order to really get more buy-in from people. I believe you'll always have persons that are going to be skeptical or against things. That's how our society works. That's how we humans work. But I think that you can foster behavioral change if you bring people to the table and work as peers.
Yeah, now as we have seen, we have talked about that earlier, diversity has more dimensions than just the gender one. And of course, there's diversity of backgrounds, of culture, of identities. And so I would be curious, Catherine, in your experience, what are some elements that are needed to create a space where someone can educate themselves, where they can feel free to ask questions about culture and identity without feeling that they're offending or evading someone else's comfort zone? This is particularly an issue in multicultural, multinational workplaces.
Yeah, I think I come from a position of luck and fortune, I would say. I mean, growing up in Canada, very multicultural and open, respectful society, and now being in the workplace that I am now, where we have 70 different nationalities in our membership. Our core team has almost 40 different nationalities. So it's just like, I'm super lucky to begin with. So sometimes I hear things like this and I'm like, what? That doesn't make any sense to me, because I mean, of course we have to be respectful of other cultures and careful how we communicate. But at the end of the day, we're also curious beings. And I think it's okay to be curious, and we shouldn't always be afraid of offending someone because of your curiosity to learn more about their background. I mean, if I go up to someone in Canada and I say, you know, where are you from? Because they're not, you know, they don't look like me, they would probably, I know they're baffled. They're like, well, I was born in Toronto. What are you talking about? Like, why you ask? Okay, my mother, you know, maybe came from Somalia or Bangladesh, but, you know, I'm Canadian. And so this thought is a very European thought to me, just because, you know, someone has a different color skin, maybe wears a hijab, doesn't mean that she's not from Hamburg or Dortmund or, you know, wherever. I think that we need to be careful, but at the end of the day, if you communicate well and respectful and with curiosity, and I think that you don't need to always be afraid. I think people are happy when people are inquisitive and curious about where you're from, regardless where that is or what your experience is or what your Neigung is in life. I think it's just important that we're open and helpful and curious with each other.
So open-mindedness, curiosity, flexibility, and respect.
Absolutely, and respect and sense of empathy. I mean, we all don't know where people are coming from, and when I say coming from, I don't mean from a geographic location necessarily. So I think, as always, like be very considerate in your communication style.
Thank you. Now, staying on to what sometimes happens in the workplace, we may be sometimes aware. Yeah.
Sorry, maybe I can just add one thing to that, because I think one thing that I've seen has to be very successful for this is actually consciously making a space where that conversation is welcome. So at my last company, we had something called a My Culture Lunch, where people were invited to kind of openly share some information about where they're from, what their culture is, their religion, and it instantly changed the conversation from, you know, where someone might feel a little bit under the microscope, you know, a little bit targeted because they look different, to someone who feels very eager to share information about where they're from. And it really created a lot of genuine curiosity and this really nice mutual interest to kind of learn together. And I think it's all about finding that right angle where people can feel like they're being asked about their culture or background because people are truly curious, and not because, you know, they're being questioned about their identity or why they're in Germany, for example.
Now, staying on the topic of workplace interactions, now sometimes we may be aware of policies that are unfair, or a lack of action, or sometimes even abuse to a colleague in terms of inclusion. And we may be wavering, we may not know exactly what is the appropriate response, what is the right thing to do about it. And I'd like to pick you up on that, Stuart. How do we move from being a passenger, of observer, to being a rower on the boat? How do we actually take action?
Very easy. If you see something, say something. It's really quite easy. Like, I think this is one of the big problems, that the people are not speaking out when they see something, that something happened. I think this is the first thing you really have to do. That is, like, when you I don't know, you're in a class, or you're in your office, maybe not home office right now, but if you see that somebody misbehaved, it's very important to say something about it. Maybe not always in front of everybody, because this can create more tension, but something like going to this to the person who did it and ask them why, and also like trying to help maybe this person. Hey, what you just said was like not the right thing thing to say. Maybe it was homophobic, sexism, etc. It's not always that somebody, if the person behaves like not good, that this person is a mean person, or it was really targeted, or was sexist. It was just like they did not know that this is wrong very often. And I think it's important that we don't always blame people if they say something wrong, if you see that, because this just creates an atmosphere where you're really shy to say anything anymore, because it's just like, oh my God, who I do offend now again. So it's important to talk to the people. But then, of course, on the other side, it's very important if something is happening and this person is not stopping with it, like especially in working place, and you have a colleague maybe who is a little bit, let's say, too flirty, and is always saying things to one colleague, and she told him, please stop, don't do that, and he keeps doing that, then it's very important that you have somebody you can talk in a company about this, that there's one person who's really, it's not just like you're the leader or someone, it must be a person who understands this topic. Best thing is like a diversity manager or somebody, I don't know the word for it in English, but normally you have it in big companies, you know, you can talk to some person if something happens. And then it's important that those people are well educated and know how to deal with the situation. Because right now, if the people are not trained, something can happen that maybe the person goes to the other person. Oh, Jesus, man. My English is today very bad. I don't know why. And she says, yeah, he's always like saying, I have short skirts, whatever. And then the person just reacts, yeah, maybe you should not dress like this. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit like your fault. Oh my God, how can you say something like this? Yeah, it's like this victim blaming. I think it sounds funny. It's not, because it happens so very often. So this is like two places where we can change with ourselves to really say something if we see something, and then also trying to make sure that the company is really doing something in this regard. And the problem is, it's mostly like the top management, they can decide to really do it. I see very often that like there's, and especially with LGBT, there are always like one or two people in a company who's doing a lot and trying to change the system and trying to make it more equal, etc. And they're doing things. The problem is only that when they leave the company again and there's no structure there, there's no policies there, then everything goes away again. So it's very important that there is always like new structure, new policies to really make sure nothing can happen. And if there's abuse of power, and the company knows how to deal with that. Yeah.
So clear
I hope it makes
policies,
sense.
Yeah, clear communication for sure.
Oh yeah,
Now, a lot of what goes on behind establishing the culture of diversity and inclusion has to do essentially with fighting stereotypes. Unfortunately, stereotypes that are very deep, very innate, and that must be challenged. And I'm going to revert to the gender example, simply because here's where we have stereotypes galore. How do we fight against the cultural perceptions that can harm a woman's career? In particular, you know, in a management position, being direct as a woman may make you feel or look aggressive. Being emotional as a woman may make you feel weak. So these are some of the stereotypes that women managers are often fighting against. And that's a question for all of our panelists from your experience. Sarah?
Sure. I'm happy to take a attempt at this one. I think one thing I've seen to be very effective is to make this behavior normalized and visible. So for example, showing leaders, both men and women, how they have, been in situations where they felt, you know, emotional, or where they, you know, have been labeled as aggressive, kind of make this stereotype very visible throughout the company. And I think it does two things. It helps people recognize the biases they have, which is what Stuart mentioned earlier about unconscious bias training, but it also helps people see that everyone has these behaviors, and it's not just a gendered, you know, it's not necessarily just a gendered behavior to get emotional at work, but it's unfortunately only women who are stigmatized this way. So, you know, an example of this is I recently saw a leader talk about, you know, how they're really having a tough time as a parent during Corona times, they're, you know, or having a leader talk about how in times in their life they've struggled with mental health. You know, it creates this empathetic conversation between the leader and the rest of the company, and it also kind of normalizes this behavior so people who are not in leadership feel more comfortable being open. And I don't think the answer to this is actually changing the way women or men behave. You know, it's not telling women not to cry at work or telling women to change how they communicate. It's really about making this type of behavior normal. I mean, everyone has a day at work where they get emotional and they get upset and they might cry. It doesn't mean you're a bad leader, you know, and it doesn't mean that you're a weak person. And I think having a culture within a company where these kind of stereotypes are, you know, when people, you know, villainize this behavior, really having a culture where you can call that out, and, you know, having a culture where people feel comfortable to speak out and say, you know, actually, I think that with the comments you made about the female executive was actually really biased and based on stereotypes, and I wish you wouldn't do that. And I liked what Stuart said earlier, you see something, you say something. If the culture exists where people feel more comfortable to speak up on behalf of their colleagues, I think that's where you actually see these behaviors change.
There's also, I really would like to say something to that, because this is a big topic. As maybe you said at the beginning, we also founded Panda 7 years ago, which is a women leadership network. We do a lot of contests for women, and it's not me, it's like Isabel, she's the co-founder. And we also did a study about how can you win the contest. So like the contest, what we do is like, there's like 100 women competing one day with different kind of leadership situation, gathering points. And by the end, the person with the most point win. And we tried to find out what was the reason why the people voted for specific women. And a university did that, the Salzburger University, from 6 years of research from all of our contests. And the result of it was really terrible, because as the women who won, who got the most points, it was so hard to reach, because you could not be too pretty, or like what people seeing as pretty or not so pretty. You have to be in the middle of that. You cannot be too pretty, you cannot be less pretty, and you cannot be too confident, and you cannot to be too, you look weak or something, yeah? You have to be precisely in the middle. This is so hard to accomplish. It's not possible. And by the way, if you do it with men, it's the opposite. This is like, you can be like this or that, doesn't matter. If you are at the end of the spectrum, you always win, and everybody thinks, oh, he's a great leader. Yeah, like if a man cries, oh, wow, he's sensible. Yeah, he's like, oh my gosh, he feels me. Yeah, oh my God, this is a great leader. Or he's very strong, and he's saying, oh, you do this and this and this. And then he's not arrogant, but, oh, he knows what to do. Yeah, we need those leaders. Yeah, see Trump and stuff. Oh. So it's so terrible right now, because for women, it is harder to really win this game of leadership. And I think what Sarah said is so important, to make it visible that we have these biases. Everybody, and by the way, it's not only men, also women have this bias against other women. So we need to know it, and we need then for this some other systematics to really see which women really can come to the top. That's the reason why I also believe in quotas again. Yeah, it's not the nicest person maybe who gives a fuck, but at least we get more women to the top, which is so important, that we have more role models out there. And then you can see, yeah, you can be maybe a person who cries a little bit more, or is very strong but still is on the top. And we need this. We need more to know about this.
So still on the topic of biases and stereotypes, we have a question coming from the Q&A from the audience. For all panelists, have you ever made a stereotype faux pas, and what did you learn from it? As we're all human, so we all make mistakes. What has been your own experiences with biases and stereotypes?
Okay, I can start. I don't want to be the guy again who's talking the whole time, but it's okay. It's like, you don't feel maybe so good. And yeah, one of the things where I was really terrible, that was like, I was talking with a person and I really thought it was a guy, but it wasn't a guy, it was a woman. And she was transition. And I feel so bad because I'm working on this topic the whole time, and I really didn't notice it, and I completely misspoke, and whatever I said to her, it was just bad, and I could just apologize for that, and then it took a while, but she forgave me, and now we know each other, and now she's helping me a little bit sometimes, because also like for me, a couple of years ago, I really didn't understand transgender at all. For me, there was something like, is there something going on? Is this like, I self had so many biases and did not know. So I really need to getting to know some people who are like this, and to really understand the world. And now it's like, there's no problem, not just not a problem, like I appreciating it much more, know so much more. So I think it's important, if you do mistakes, and especially with biases, just learn from it, and understand maybe that everybody is doing mistakes, especially like in this topic, if it's about women or about other things of the diversity. It's okay to do mistakes, but learn from it and become better.
Now, Sarah, Catherine, from your experience, staying still on the topic of the gender, what do you think there are some ways in which male advocates can actually make a difference? For gender, I mean, advocates for gender diversity.
Sorry. As I said before, I think it's a question of bringing people on board. So you have to be able to identify who already is sensitive to this topic and is willing to be an ambassador with you, because I think role modeling is important, and role modeling shouldn't only be by the underrepresented communities, but also by people who are standing up and calling out that there's a problem in the system, that we have like deep needs to improve the situation. So identifying those people in your private circles, in work, and bringing them on board and asking them to champion with you. Here, what we do at Factory Berlin, we have an LGBTQ+ circle, we have a Women in Tech circle. So these are our advocate groups from our community that go out and really champion the different causes and bring awareness to issues. And we don't just have the typical representations of those groups within those circles. And I think bringing visibility to the fact that we have them, indicating that it's an important topic and it's part of our value set here, and thereby raising awareness for it is key.
Sarah?
Maybe I can add one thing really quickly. Another thing that I've read about is sponsorship. So it's like mentorship. So, you know, the same way you would be matched with someone who is more experienced, who can learn from. But essentially, sponsorship is about someone who really advocates on your behalf for your success. So if you pair a male sponsor with a female leader or employee, and kind of make that male sponsor kind of responsible for helping that woman succeed. So it could be, you know, making sure that they are being considered for promotion, making sure that they have a chance to speak in a meeting, making sure they're getting on important projects that give them visibility. There's a fantastic TED Talk out there around sponsorship, so I would recommend you check it out. But I think it's one way where you can, it also helps to build empathy and have that male leader really understand what the actual challenges are for that woman, for example, to access opportunities in leadership. He might not really be able to connect with that until he actually sits down and understands what those challenges are.
Right, thank you. Now moving on to the question of implementation. Obviously, it's not always so easy to start with promoting, truly promoting diversity and inclusion. And so you can think about that at the organizational level, or you can think about that at individual grassroots level. If we take the organization level first, if you were to start diversity and inclusion strategy in your company, where would you start? Would you recommend to start with gender, or would you go across the board? This is one of the questions that came earlier from the audience.
Yeah, so it's like an easy question, but it's hard to answer because as we said also at the beginning, actually it must come from the top. I always hope it's enough if it starts like at the bottom, and then people just like, okay, let's do something and let's create a network, and then it becomes better. I just see it's so much work. It takes forever, and if you don't have the support from top, it's not really working. So I think if you start at a company and they don't do it, I would really like trying to convince the leadership to do something here. And if they don't understand it and they don't think it's important, then I would say the best thing what you can do is to leave this company again and go to another one who's more open for it, because you will not really succeed in this company if they're not really believing in diversity and so on. So I think this is very important, or something you can do when you're entering like a new company. And maybe you should do it before. So like before you start working at a company, really looking into the company, how open are they? What are they doing? Are they just like right now successfully? Because actually in the future, only companies who really invest in diversity will be successfully. There is all the proof out there. But right now we still have some companies who still make some money and they're doing not. So look into that and make sure that you really appreciate it in this company, whatever you are, if women, LGBT, if you're from abroad, if you're old, young, whatever.
But Stuart, on that point, there was another question from the audience, actually for all the panelists, taking even one step earlier than that, before you join the company, if you're a prospective employee, a candidate for one of their jobs, how can you really know whether the company really practices diversity or whether it's some sort of another common diversity washing?
Yes, there's like this nice flyer with an Asian person and like a white woman. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of people playing the diversity card right now, and because they know it's fancy, it's like a nice buzzword, we should do something. I really had it one time that in a company that they just took pictures for the brochure, and an Asian looking person was walking by and said, can we have this person for the picture? We need some more diversity, and say, oh my gosh, yeah, but it's like this. There are some companies that really don't get it. They just, you know, we have to do it right now because some stakeholder asking for that. They really not a lot, I cannot prove that, but I just know there are companies out there that don't take it seriously. So look into, you can find online first, look at the company website, very easy point. You always see what positions are open, and they must have something there about diversity. If they don't have anything, really, that doesn't cost a lot of money. And then even if they have it there, just go, you can look and just Google it. Really, there's like platforms like Kununu where you can see what the other people are saying about this company. And there's some other platforms you can look. Ask people who maybe have worked in this company. How open is it? The problem is, especially with bigger companies, you can have like departments which are very open and so cool and so diverse, and then you have other ones you're just like, what? cannot be. Also, like different countries, like if you're working for Google in Silicon Valley is so much different than working for Google here in Berlin. I can still say it's good, but it's very, very different cultures. So you really have to check it out before. And what I, especially of course for LGBT, what I suggest is look out for the employer seal Pri 500. It's like for top LGBT employees. That means they have to go through audits. And we do, by the way, this audit and checking them out with over 60 points, what you can do as a company. And only when they reach at least 65%, then they get the seal. So that it's also a proof from outside. And there are also other seals for other diversity mention. And I really think this is important to really look out for that. Because the companies, even some companies right now, they want to do, but they don't know what to do. This is especially like with gender, it's a little bit better because every company was like, okay, this we should do. But this is not diversity, by the way. It's great, but it's not diversity. You have to care about everybody. Also about the white straight man. He should be also included in that. So yeah, this is like what I think you can do before, and you really should do the research before, because when you get the job and you come to this team, and then you realize, damn it, it's really not good. Or a new person comes in, it's really terrible, and you cannot talk to anybody, and nobody understands that, or just asking, hey, don't behave like this, yeah, grow some balls, or some stupid things, then like, oh my gosh, you wasted so much time. So yeah, check it out before.
Just to add to that, I mean, if you look at the structure of the company, what the management looks like, that'll also give you an indication of how truly diverse they are. If those companies put on events, check out their event series. Is it, again, a whole bunch of manuals out there? Are the topics really addressing kind of the state of affairs today? I think those are good key indicators, even how they communicate through their social media channels. And on their website, I mean, you can tell when it's authentic versus D&I washing language. I think you can start building a sensibility to that.
I mean, this actually goes in the direction of another question we had from the audience about how do you actually measure, in a hard measure, in an index, say, diversity and inclusion in a company or an organization. Are there any benchmark or items a company needs to check to really qualify? I mean, you, Catherine, spoke about attending a program where there was no female panelist. Of course, also looking at the structure of the board of management and so on, you can already have some insights. But indeed, that is a question, is there an index or a measure that is widely accepted or used in the industry? Because that would be one transparent way in which such factors could all be captured.
They're just building something, like there will come something out, it's ISO something, and it's like a guideline for companies what you should do. The only problem, it's just like the minimum requirements then. It's not like really top of the best what you can do, it's just like the minimum. And really right now there is nothing out there, at least we also haven't seen it. And just more like for the different departments of diversity, there you can see something. Like with our seal, which is like really like very specific, and you only get the seal when you're the best. And so it's a little bit harder right now to really find out. You have to do the work by yourself right now a lot, unfortunately. Or Sarah, Katrine, do you know any big index and like real good index where we can see that?
No, but I'm sure we can find out. We have good networks, and we can definitely find out. I just had one more response to the previous question is, you know, if you're interviewing, flat out come out and say that that's important to you, and ask that potential employer what they're doing to address diversity and inclusion. And you're going to hear in her or his response, you know, if that's something that resonates with you or not. And so I think that, you know, addressing the importance of the situation head on is key.
By the way, this is always a good trick, especially for LGBT people, because you don't want to ask in an interview if you're not sure. It's your job maybe you don't want, what are you doing for LGBT people? Then it's always good just to say, so what are you doing in diversity inclusion in general? And this doesn't matter like what part you are in this group of diversity, but it helps you a little bit more. Also, by the way, again, also for white guys who are straight, do the same question, because you don't want to work in an environment where it's just about like power and you have to fight for your spot. It's not a happy place. It's really not. You want to have like working in an open environment. So also for you, it should be very important that a company is investing in diversity, because one way or the other, you will end up there, yeah? Everybody will end up in this diversity thing, because when everybody gets, okay, most people are getting older, and there you are, then you're also talking about diversity.
Now, staying on the topic of implementation, may I just ask you for a couple of quick tips, thinking now not at organizational, but at individual level. What are some easy actions, or perhaps not so easy actions, 2 to 3 quick things that we can all do more or less on a daily basis in order to promote inclusion and diversity, both in our workplaces, but also in our social lives?
If you have a communication tool, you share the resources. There are so many resources out there. I mean, knowledge is really power, and there are great videos out there. There are studies. There are, online events. Share all those resources with your colleagues and your friends and your environment. I mean, that's absolutely key. And another thing that I find is important is to commend and laud organizations out there that are doing really good things, that are supporting underrepresented groups or individuals. Give them like the acknowledgement that they need, and by showing them support, you empower them to do more. And I think that's a good way for us as individuals, as citizens, as employees, to also keep that conversation really at top of mind.
Sarah?
Yes, I think I'm frozen, but anyway, can you still hear me? Oh, there you go, I'm back. Yeah, so I will definitely echo what you said about, sharing resources. I mean, I think to me, it's about taking the responsibility to educate yourself, and not expecting others, especially those who, who are, people of color, women, people with less visibility and leadership, not expecting those people to do the education for you. Essentially, you take on that responsibility to educate yourself. And, it's also about making sure that the books you're reading and, the people you follow on social media, making sure that they don't always look like you, make sure that you get different perspectives from your own, your own echo chamber. And then, oftentimes I think in D&I we get feedback of, hey, the thing you said is it wasn't appropriate, or, you referred to me as a word that I don't, identify with. Take those opportunities to learn, and take it as an opportunity, like, okay, thank you for that feedback. Don't get defensive. Don't say, oh, I didn't mean it that way, or you're misunderstanding. No, take it as an opportunity to grow and learn. That's the best thing you can do. Say, thank you for the feedback. I'm going to use that and learn for next time. And lastly, being an ally. I mean, I think, I think we touched on this a few different times today, but making sure that, that you aren't just speaking up for your own interests, but speaking up for the interests of others. Of course, make sure that your help is wanted, but, if you see something, say something, exactly what Stuart said. And don't just go up to the person later and said, oh, that you really got talked over in that meeting. I mean, that's not helpful. Speak up in the meeting when it happens. That's when your voice is most effective, not after the fact, not in private. So yeah, I think everyone has a responsibility to be an ally in these situations. And I think that's a small thing we can all do as not just people working in D&I, but just as humans.
Maybe also one thing, I think it's very important, especially when you want to do something regard of diversity, even if it's private or a company, try to make it fun. Really, this is something, diversity is, sometimes it's very, very hard, and it has to do with loss of power sometimes. Yeah, it's not always the easiest one. So we always trying to make diversity a lot of fun. So when we also do go to companies, so we also do consulting, go to companies and trying to teach them what to do and how to treat LGBT people. We really try to make it also in a fun way, so people can relax, can open up, can ask the questions, etc. What needs to be asked, because we have to learn about it, and it should be fun. This is really, we can see when people having fun, they learn so much easier, and they like this topic. I think this is the reason why Sticks and Stones is working so well, also for straight people, because it's fun. We have the DJs, we have an underground club there, we have cocktails here, we have like flamboyant speakers on the stage, and it's just fun, and you can be who you are, and it's like, it's great, and you can do mistakes. So this I really can.
Engagement.
Huh?
It's a way of building engagement, right? Through
Yes.
shared fun, positive experiences.
Yes, and also go to events when they're like a little bit different. Even like you can, I think it's also great in a company, but what Sarah and Katrine said is like, don't go just to your circle. You can also just go to the women network and just ask, hey, it's like, I don't know, but can I help you? Is there something? And if you can, you learn so much. Like we have so many straight people who are helping us with all the different events, what we do. And they're just loving it, because it is, first, I think it's fun. On the other side, they learn so much. And they're building new networks, which can help them in the future also to getting a new job. Because as I told you, every third or fourth job goes through or comes from a network. So it's good if you invest in diversity, you also have more opportunities later.
So that's a good perspective. I wish to move on to the next point, because we're getting quite a few questions in the Q&A from the audience, and they mostly have to do with the environment in Germany, and the local and the national job market and culture. Now, we've heard earlier that working for Google in California is not the same as working for Google in Berlin. So maybe if I can just pick up on that and go through a couple of the questions in the Q&A thread. This is a question to all the panelists. There are many international students with masters and other certificates from German universities who hardly get jobs. Meanwhile, job portals are full of vacancies. Do you think that the German job market is diverse and inclusive enough, and that they appreciate international talents?
Not so much, unfortunately. I wish I could say it differently and say, yes, you're welcome. But unfortunately, a lot of German companies still like really want people who can speak good German. This is like, we wanted to do, a couple of years ago, we wanted to do a specific job fair just for expats, etc., because we think they're amazing. They have so much good grades. They have so much skills that they know the world. This must be so great. And it was so hard to find companies. So the good thing is there are companies out there, they really don't care. They have this open environment and they only speak English, especially like here in Berlin, startup scene is quite a little bit more often open to that. And also some big companies where it's just like they only speak in English, it's fine. But at least like what we see in the last years, it is a harder place if you really, if you cannot speak super good German, unfortunately.
Also beyond just the linguistic aspect, because I'm sure some of these students speak great German as well. I think that from what I've seen in the interviewing process and the entire paperwork that is demanded of you, it's like ridiculously biased. Asking for photos, asking for your confession, your date of birth. I mean, those are already hugely problematic and lead to biased hiring practices. My recommendation there is always, as Stuart said, there are great companies out there. Look to great companies. Look to companies that value diversity, that value multifaceted experiences and mindsets, and you know, listen to people who work in those companies, because they may still use the same hiring practices because maybe they're obliged to, but regardless, that if you have people that endorse those organizations, those are the ones you would want to gravitate to. I do think it's still a huge problem in this country.
On that note,
maybe the schools, sorry, if I could just add one more point, because I think there's a role for the academic institutions to play in this, with job fairs, with using kind of a network of the university to make those introductions and endorse great candidates.
Yeah,
also with our Sticks and Stones career fair, like we have, by the way, next month we have the Sticks and Stones digital fair, which is great. Like it's for 7 days and it's already 80 companies there. You can sign up for that online. There are some companies who really like open, and they really don't care if you speak German or not. But also there, I would say at least half of them, they really want people with good German-speaking language. On the other side, they're really more open in regards everything else. So like how you look like, how old you are, etc. This is like, at least for like our companies, not big of a challenge. But sometimes, especially if they're customers, a lot of Germans, then there is sometimes also a problem.
On that note, there's another comment in the Q&A that there are only 3 or 4 companies in Berlin that have a dedicated D&I position within the organization. Do you think this would change soon? And if so, what do you expect to be the determinant factor for this change?
I didn't understand. Did I understand that there are only like 3 diversity managers here in Berlin companies? No.
No, I actually don't think that's true. There's not that many, I would say, as being one of them. I would say it's less than 20, but I think it's more than 10.
I think also it's more.
Do you see this number increasing? Do you see that the companies are going to become more mindful of having a dedicated position to diversity and inclusion?
Yes, there's also like, there was like for future jobs some study, and they also saw that especially like also diversity inclusion is more relevant, and in the future this will grow a lot. So this is really a future job market. Thank God. Thank Greg.
Now, of course, the diversity is not just about having a work environment that is inclusive, but it's also about fairness in the work environment. And here comes another question from the audience. What do you think needs to change, and on what level, whether state, corporation, or community, for Germany to minimize the unadjusted gender pay gap, which last year was 20%?
So I have a few ideas here. I will say first, I think organizations should have clear salary bands, standard job titles, and seniority levels. I think that's one very, not easy, but one very important way where you can actually create more standardization across titles. And also it gives more visibility for the employees to know in which direction they want to move to make sure they have access to high-paying jobs. But of course, when we talk about unadjusted pay gap, we also talk about making sure that, women or non-Germans also have access to high-paying jobs. And that's through education, it's through, networking opportunities. So I think it's not something that exactly as this question referred to, it's not something that just the corporations can solve. It's really something that it's a society challenge. And I think it's important that it's visible. And I think it's important that, we can't just say that, if we have, if people are getting paid the same for the same job, that doesn't fix this. We actually need to make sure that, women, for example, aren't being encouraged to go to more low-paying professions, because then ultimately they lose out on a lot of opportunity to make money in their lives. So I think it starts very early, just to kind of to welcome women and other people who are underrepresented in these high-paying fields, kind of invite them to be, learn more about that industry, to learn more about what that industry offers them, and make sure you remove barriers for how those, for how you can go from, let's say a high school to a person in a leadership role. Make sure that that person has access to all those opportunities along the way.
And maybe also, I think it's very important because I think it will take still a while that this is more equal. So what helps is first learn to negotiate. It's really like, I think it helps a lot just to know how it works and know some techniques, because this is men are very good in that by nature. I don't know why, but they are asking more easy to get more money or to get a promotion because they always believe they are so much better than they really are. And this is one thing that everybody should learn how to negotiate. On the other side, really try to make a lot of connections and grow your network, because this is by the end will help you also a lot. And most people don't like it. So like this networking business-wise, most people don't like it. Me neither, by the way. I'm not the person like going around and talking to 100 people. I'm still doing it, but I'm trying to really learn this networking, not as a sense of like, okay, I have to connect to them so that I get something back from them later. Just like trying to make honest connection to a lot of people so that people know you know them, what they're doing, helping when you can. If you not can, then you don't, but trying to be like more, not seeing as at a, this will help me in the future, but just trying to help other people, grow your network, enjoy while doing it. But by the end, it's probably also gonna help you in the long way. So I can just recommend it. And it helped me big times. Without networks, we could not have like this this Ulala group with like we're doing 16 LGBT project and Panda on top. We do so many things, and without a network, it would never be possible. Even if our product is very good, I can tell you it's amazing, but without like networks, it will not help us. So this is also very important. Till we come to this level, and I hope in the future this will not be a problem, but I guess this will still take a couple of years.
Time. So it's basically work that we all need to do. Yeah, we all need to engage in. Now, of course, we are in the middle of a pandemic. So talking about factors for change, this is another question we had in the Q&A. What impact on diversity and equality do you expect due to the outbreak of the pandemic? And our audience member wanted to share two of their examples of the impact just from Germany. The budget of the Women Initiative in their organization was cancelled in March. And secondly, the court case of a colleague that sued a corporation about gender discrimination was postponed and delayed without a date, again, due to the pandemic. So how do you think that the pandemic and the aftermath will change or will impact initiatives for diversity and inclusion in the corporate world?
I think it will showcase now really who are the companies who really understand diversity and who did not. Because if you understand diversity, you just know right now it's very important to be a diverse company, to find the best solutions and so on. So if you're now really cutting back just on diversity, but on the other side, it's also like, because a lot of companies going like through the worst of their times and they have to make cutbacks, but then they do it like everywhere. And I think if they do it like everywhere, like also with marketing and like everywhere, then I cannot really say, this company is not believing in diversity. It's just like, okay, they lose so much, and just to stay alive, they're also doing that. But if a company it actually works out and it's not so bad, and then they're cutting it, then I'm like, okay, this is they never really believe in diversity, because this will help the company to come out strong out of this coronavirus thing.
Sarah?
I'll also say, yeah, there's a lot you can do without money. And I think it's important that diversity initiatives are supported financially, and I am not encouraging those budgets get cut, but I think there's a lot of grassroots community building that can happen, you know, especially now as everyone is working remotely. I think this kind of removes the barriers of, you know, I'm siloed in my location, or I'm siloed in my business unit. You know, it kind of levels the playing field, and everyone can really get together, work together to build this community globally. So I've actually seen a lot of really impressive innovation happening with employee networks during, you know, during the last 2 months. So I've seen employee networks do virtual, you know, virtual movie nights with this browser plugin called Netflix Party, where everyone can sync up and watch the same movie at one time. I've seen, you know, virtual STEM dishes where people are cooking meals together, or you know, sharing resources on what it's like to be a parent, or you know, or maybe what it's like to live alone during this time. So I actually think there's a lot of opportunity to build community, and I hope that the least that organizations can do is support those employees. I mean, it costs them pretty much nothing to support those employees to build those communities. So I would say if they can minimally do that, that has a big impact, and it has a long-lasting impact. So even if budgets have to get cut, I mean, I think it's unfortunate, but maybe it's a necessity in some situations. But at least I hope organizations can continue to support this grassroots work.
I, by the way, think it's so good right now, this time to start new things, and maybe it grows bigger. So like we have a community called RAM, and RAM is a global LGBT leadership community, and it's really global. Like we have people from Australia to New York to wherever I think about it, they are in our network. And we always had just like one event, offline event, maybe in Berlin or Vancouver, or we wanted to go to India this year, but Corona, thank you. But because of this, we went online, and now we do online events together, and suddenly we can meet so more often and faster. And it's so interesting right now. We have a feeling now RAM is really growing. So I think also with like bigger organizations, when they're global, normally they're always waiting for like this one big event of a year, yeah, to meet finally online. But now you have the chance to really connect on a global level, or just also in Germany, because you cannot travel everywhere. So I think it's a really good time for, especially for the community, to really grow and to make new connections, which is also, again, good for the company and good for yourself. So yeah, and by the way, join RAM too. If you're an LGBT future leader, then please join us. And somebody asked me on LinkedIn, which is very nice, one of the panels here. And yes, you can of course connect with me also on LinkedIn, and to widen your network.
Now we're still going through the Q&A items that came up in the chat. There's a question here about that we're all currently working from home. And so another type of diversity that has very much come up and is relevant in the current context is socioeconomic diversity. How can companies support employees from very different socioeconomic backgrounds who may face limitations when working from home? And can they do this without incurring too many costs?
Katrin, Sarah?
Yeah, I'll mention a few ideas. I think this is hugely important, and there's actually been some interesting discussions on Twitter lately about some companies who switched completely to remote work, Twitter, for example. And, you know, this means that you don't necessarily have to live in Silicon Valley in the US in order to work for those companies anymore. And this is actually a huge advantage for people who live in poorer cities, or people who, for whatever reason, do not want to live in these very, very expensive cities. So, you know, and in the end, it saves companies money, because companies don't have to spend so much in very expensive real estate. So I think it's worth it for companies to spend a little bit more to pay for, you know, maybe a standing desk, a high-speed internet connection, a special chair, whatever, to help that employee work from home, because in the long run, they save money because they don't need to have the same office space. So I think it's definitely a net win. I hope other companies see it this way. I think I've seen Germany be one of the more reluctant places to adapt, to kind of adopt a work from home lifestyle, work from home working culture. but I think it offers so many opportunities to employees. And, you know, a lot of people could have their dream job if only they could stay in the city that they want to live in, or the town, or the wherever. So yeah, I think it's a huge topic for diversity, and I hope that we see, you know, an opportunity for more people to you know, live in cheaper cities, live in areas that are more remote, and still have access to these really high-paying jobs.
I completely agree with Sarah. Completely. This is where we see it. The only thing where I'm saying like, oh, Germany is again like that slow. It's not. Like there's a lot of companies right now also thinking about it and see the big impact and also the benefits of it. Also my company, we're 11 people and we are working also remotely now since 2 months. At the beginning, we didn't want it, like, well, when can we come back to the office? And right now, because they get cozy at home, they like it, being in jogging the whole time, you don't have to dress up. They really love it now. And I have only like 2 people who really want to come back, but just because the neighbors are so loud. Otherwise, they really like to work from home. And I also saw a different study about this, that more companies will do that. And now there will be a lot of questions about this. What can companies do to really support their employees at home? Because they save a lot of money if they don't need so big office spaces. So employees will ask, so what about like the internet connection? Yeah, do I get a fast one? Do you pay for that? And I think it's important that employees start asking also these questions, because the companies see there's a benefit, and that will be quiet because they can save money. So I think employees should ask for that. So if you go somewhere, I think this is like the next level now in job market, that you're not just asking for what you're doing for diversity, but also like asking, okay, how about working from remote, and what do I get from you? Because it's not everybody has the best internet connection, and it's important that you have like a good place to sit, etc. And I think there will be a new market for this, because it's really working good. And also big companies like Deutsche Bahn, it's a partner of us, and they also told me in the HR department, they love it. They're saying they're already doing like online events. They don't have to travel the whole time, and they're really getting along with this idea, and I want to keep doing that. They really want to do more online interviews and also events, doing that more online, and also working from home. So I don't believe it's just like a few companies. I think it's kind of a future of work.
I agree with all of these statements, yet at the same time, I think that there's something that will be lost in actually D&I when it comes to just having a remote environment, because a lot of our interaction is based on social cues and communication that happens between Zoom calls and between the email lines. And when you don't have that physical interaction or the physical space for that to take place, it can lead to people being left behind. And so I think that we have to be careful if we kind of ostracize from the kind of meeting environment or communal kind of experience, it can also lead to a very strange society.
And by the way, sorry, because yes, I agree to Katrin too. I think what we maybe need is really like different spaces. So like that you have, that you really want to go to this place because it's fun, you learn something, and it's not just work. So also what my team is doing now, we also start doing like a lot of meetings. We're trying to find, if we come together, that it's more fun. That we share different things, so that we like also we do virtual coffee breaks together, so we have this connection. And I really believe that this office spaces we have right now will change big time, in the sense of that you have to have a nicer space that people come there, and really not just to work, but really that you come there to be together, to celebrate together, so you have a good time, and not just like just working on your laptop, because just like you can do that from home too. Then you don't need somebody else. But for really having like new ideas, I think also it's better to be together and work together. But I'm pretty sure there will not just be remote. I think there will be both.
Thank you. Now we're getting close to our time. There may be two more questions that I'd like to take on from the audience. And there's actually two questions that are linked. And that has to do with the relationship between a perceived lack of quality or drive down in quality levels and gender quotas. There are people saying that having gender quotas means making allowances for less than qualified people. How would you respond to comments like these? And more generally, how do you handle the mindset of fellow colleagues who keep viewing diversity and inclusion as being a criteria that's unfair and you know, a nuisance for quality levels? What would be your reaction?
Only people who have fear of losing power argue like this. This is always like, and like only the best people should get the job. Yeah, then look at the board. Yeah, it's not always like the best people there. Like you can look everywhere, all the companies, when you look at the top leaders, you always spot people, you always think, how did this person get the job? Yeah, and it's not because of the quality or because this person is so amazing. It's about connection, about politics, etc. It's the real world. Unfortunately, it's not. Unfortunately, we don't live in a society where only like the best people get the jobs. There are so many other things count into that. So it's not working. The system of like, yeah, let's try to focus on the best people. It does not help, and we can see with quotas. It's working. We just introduced, like in Germany a couple of years ago, with the quota for board members, and it worked. Suddenly, we had those people. Yeah, and I think we need more quotas. We need quotas not just for women, but for all of the diversity. Phyla. I really believe in that. So it's more equal, because also that means for men it's the same thing, because when you're in a company where it's just like tons of women, then this quota will help also women to get to this position. Yeah, it's not a women quota, it's a gender quota. And this is the only way how we really can change the system. I think it's the fairest thing. And by the way, and if there's a woman coming to the top and she's not great, who cares? There's a lot of men out there who's the same. This is more equality. Yeah. So if I really this topic, I'm listening to that since 10 years. Like, I have it up to here, because this is always like, it's only the best people. And I look most to the people and say, you're not the best. Yeah. So you're just lucky to be there. And it's always losing power and stuff. So let's bring the quotas there, please. Fast.
Right, and I'd like to end on another question from one of the audience members who is addressed to all of the panelists, and who is asking for a recommendation in the spirit of educating ourselves for a book, a documentary, or any other thing that is worth watching or reading on the topic. That in your opinion is a must watch or a must read. And I'm aware that Sarah has already shared a link on the study of discrimination of applicants in Germany in our webinar chat function. But any other thoughts, any other input?
Yes.
Very compelling documentary that I saw was on Ruth Bader Ginsburg called RBG. Just incredible testament to someone's strength, willpower, intellect, and ability to, ascend the highest peaks of the U.S. Court system, overcoming decades of discrimination and idiocy. So it's a really incredible movie. It's not an intellectual paper, but it's very, very stimulating nonetheless.
I'll share two books really quickly. I actually have them next to me. So On Being Included by Sarah Ahmed, and Inclusion, Diversity, the Workplace, and the Will to Change. So both of these books are about institutions and how diversity and inclusion plays a part within them. So institutions meaning organizations, companies, universities. So definitely recommend both of those books.
Okay, and I forgot, unfortunately, the other book, but a book I can really recommend, and I think this will change your whole life, really. And there are not so many books out there I have read that really changed me, but for me, it made the world makes so much more sense. It's very difficult to understand, unfortunately, like at least it was for me. Maybe you're more intelligent than me. This is the book, oops, can I say? This is Nassim Nicholas Taleb, The Black Swan, it's called. It's not the movie with the dancing thing. It's nothing to do with that. It's more about statistics. And statistic, sounds boring. Yeah, we had it in school. But this one, this will really be, when people tell you always about something about statistic and how the world is running, and will tell you what will happen in the future, you will hear it every day. And this makes you understand the world a little bit better. You're more critical, and when people tell you something, oh, you will listen, but you will not believe everything what people are saying, especially when they come in with statistics, or will tell you this will happen in the future, and this will come, and this is blah, blah, blah. Yeah, this book, best book, it's my Bible. It's really my Bible. It's not so much diversity, but I think there's also diversity in it. It's just the best book.
I love you too. I use it actually sometimes for teaching, so it's a good book to have as a reference. All right, so this brings our webinar to a close. I'd like to thank very much our three panelists, Catherine, Stuart, Sarah, for sharing your insights, your thoughts, and your experiences with us. I'd like to thank our audience for their thought-provoking questions and input. And in these uncertain and somewhat strange times, I'd like to wish you all to stay well, stay safe, and particularly stay engaged. This is a long journey ahead of us, but we'll get there. Thank you, and all the best.
Thank you. Bye. Sign up for Sticks and Stones. Bye.